Today we're going to be starting a brand new video series titled What's Next. In this series I will go over every single division. It'll be 8 different parts, obviously for 8 different divisions, and I'll go over every single team and their 2023 review and how they can improve in 2024. What's next for each team. Either way, before we get into this video, I just want to let you guys know once again, please check out the Tuesday Night Takes podcast on my channel, also on Spotify. Either one, check it out. Spend a week with me and a buddy going over the NFL on a weekly basis. Also, make sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button, doing a jersey giveaway at 1,000 subs, just like I did at 500 subs. Either way, let's get right into this video. We're going to be starting with the order of how the teams finish. So obviously in this division, it was Washington, New York, Philly, and Dallas. So let's get all ahead and get started. Starting in Washington, in 2023, they went 4-13. Their over-under before the year started was 6.5 wins. They underperformed what they were supposed to. They started 3-3, not too bad, but they finished 1-11. That is an awful way to go. They obviously traded Chase Young and Montez Sweat, both of their edge rushers, in the middle of the year. Kind of a big issue if you ask me. I don't know why you do that both ways. Sure, you get off the money, and neither was super promising and in the age range they wanted to be, but at the same time, they have nothing behind that. The offense simply fell off in 2023. They started off really hot. Sam Howell was actually leading the league in passing yards for a long time, and he ended up falling out of that. Rivera was also just not the same guy he has been. He's been out for a few years. There's just something off of him. I think he's just a little too old to be coaching at this point. I think he's just not quite there. He's had a long run and a long go at it, but just not there. I mean, not in totality at least. And the worst defense in the league, obviously, was not helpful. They just did not achieve anything they should have. And this defense should have been a better unit. Their front seven is not bad, but they were atrocious all year long. They go on looking for offensive help with defensive help with a new coordinator, and they have a new head coach coming in. Who is that? We don't know yet. They already signed a new GM, Adam Peters, from the 49ers. They also brought in former Warriors executive Bob Myers, which is relatively interesting to me. I don't know what that means. He's got some good team building qualities, but what is he going to do for an NFL team that he did with a basketball team? He was very good in the NBA, but either way, the next head coach will change a lot of things. So they're one of the teams. They're kind of in limbo right now because, yeah, we don't know what we're going to be dealing with. This next coach might have a new philosophy entirely. Eric Bieniemy is the only guy on staff that I expect to stay. They could elevate Bieniemy to the head coach, but I think he stays offensive coordinator at this moment. So moving on from there, though, we're just going to break down this depth chart a little bit. Obviously, Sam Howell is their current QB1, and I think he has some promise. He's played 1 year in the NFL, and he looked decent-ish, I'll say. He made some mistakes, especially in the later half of the year, but the early part of the year, the way he was navigating the pocket, the way he would read through the plays, keep plays alive, and extending plays that should be extended was pretty great. He looked really good, and for the fact he was essentially a rookie this year, that's impressive. He has decent weapons in Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel. Logan Thomas is okay when he's healthy, but that's pretty much it. The offensive line was a huge issue, though. They had Ricky Stromberg, a rookie this year. I believe he started at the beginning of the year, but then got hurt early on. They were obviously out Charles Leno for a while. Andrew Wiley was a signing they brought in from Kansas City and did not play out so well for him. But either way, just the O-line was a huge issue. Nick Gates also missed quite a bit of time. The line was just in shambles, and it made things a lot harder for Sam Howell. They're probably going to move off of Sam Howell simply because they have a number 2 pick and a great chance at doing great things. And that's what you do when a highly touted prospect comes and lands in your lap like Drake May's going to. The Chicago Bears have got a guy they've played for 3 years, and he's proven nothing, but they're still considering keeping him, even though he's played 3 years and done nothing. However, the Commanders are doing it right, in my opinion. It's pretty much sold. They're moving off of Howell, and as much as I like Howell, I understand why. You go and look at some of the holes. Sam Howell, obviously a guy who's going to leave. Chris Paul, Ricky Stromberg, I feel like that's going to be a interchange swap there here next season. And Andrew Wiley was just an underwhelming pickup. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball, though. And you have Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, great defensive tackles. But your edge rushers are Casey Toohill and James Smith-Williams. Not good. The linebackers are okay. Jamin Davis got hurt early on. Jabril Cox, he's okay-ish, I guess, maybe. I don't know. He's not done a whole lot in his career so far. Cody Barton's a solid player. Nothing special there, though. And then your secondary. Obviously, Derek Forrest is a big part of that, and he was injured for a part of the season, and that did not help them at all. Cam Curl is a very good safety, in my opinion, and a guy they need to keep on. Ben St. Juste is not the best corner, but he played well at spurts, at least. You've got things to work with here, but overall, these aren't guys you're hanging your hat on. There's nobody in this secondary that's anything amazing. Looking at the holes here, obviously the edge rushers, you're not confused there. And Derek Forrest, just missing him was a big fault. They got to get him back. They got to get some edge help, and we'll see what happens here in the next moments through. So the draft capital. You have a lot of picks. 2 second-rounders, one from the Montez Sweat trade, which I think was a very good return. I think that was a bad trade for Chicago. But either way, they have a ton of cap room, $85 million basically in their pocket. And then they have some notable free agents. Their biggest positions of need, in my opinion, are the edge, a quarterback, interior O-line, offensive tackle, and then corner. Andrew Wiley, maybe you keep him on, but just wasn't pretty. You don't want to see that keep happening. And moving on, let's just go through what they are going to do here. In my opinion, round 1, they're taking a quarterback, and it's probably Drake May. There's about a 90% chance it's Drake May, because Caleb Williams should and will be off the board to Chicago at 1. And then at round 2, they have to go edge, probably twice, maybe even both in round 2. If not that, I'd say go edge in round 2, an offensive lineman in the second round 2 pick, and then in round 3, you need to hit edge again. You've got to make strides here, unless you sign somebody in free agency. And the free agents they have leaving their team, Cam Curl, Kendall Fuller, Cody Barton, and Jabril Cox are all guys I think they should at least try to attempt to bring back. Not many of them will be super expensive, but Kendall Fuller might be, Cam Curl might be, but Cody Barton, Jabril Cox, it's depth, and they're solid. They know the team. It's okay. Kicker, you could bring him back, but whatever. And how can they improve now? They need consistent quarterback play. Sam Howell was good in spurts, not long-term, and that's got to change. You have to have a consistent quarterback to win anything in the league. They need to have some key defensive additions for sure. The edge is bad. The secondary's not great. They need some help. The offensive line needs to improve, and the coaching selection, like I said before, is going to matter a ton. Some realistic additions they could potentially make this offseason, Drake May or Caleb Williams. I specifically put May first because there's little chance that Caleb Williams falls out of 1, but if it does happen, they'd be taking him, obviously. In the second and the third round, Chris Braswell from Alabama, Chop Robinson from Penn State, Jonah Ellis from Utah, all could be some potential edge rushers they could go get. Guys that I think are pretty good and will fit right into their draft slots if possible. And then maybe in the offseason, depending on how guys are re-signed, some veterans in the NFL, Josh Allen, Bryce Huff, or even Lucas Patrick on the O-line, could be guys to help this unit improve overall. Going into next year, they could be very good. They could be mediocre. They could just be bad again. We don't know. It's going to depend on this offseason, and maybe things work out for the best. And if they did, I mean, this could be what you're looking at. This right here could be a great turnout for them. Going into New York now, they finished 6-11, over under 7.5 wins. They did obviously not hit that, and they lost Daniel Jones in an ACL tear, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in Week 9. Not the best season for them. Daniel Jones is not the best quarterback. However, he is your starter. It's always going to hurt when you lose your starter. Not to mention they also lost their backup. You lose Tyrod Taylor, who's one of the better backup QBs in the league, and that just hurts. Yes, you get decent play from Tommy DeVito for a few weeks, but there's a reason why he was an undrafted free agent. Guys like him, you saw the spurts, but then it falls. It falls quickly because he's not a great quarterback. The passing game overall was ineffective. They had the least first downs in the league. That comes at the helm of having bad quarterback play year-round. Even Tyrod Taylor, who's a good backup, isn't going to be able to do a lot. Not to mention, you don't have very good receivers to throw to. A lot of the key youth in this team did not show up. You have Kayvon Thibodeau had a good year, but Evan Neal is a big one there. Just a big issue overall. Like, where did he go? He was good in his rookie year, or at least kind of, and now not so much. You've got other guys along the defense. Deontay Banks didn't have the best year. And just around the table, you have to have these young guys. Jalen Hyatt didn't get a whole lot of chance, but when he did, he was fine. But either way, you have to have those young guys show up and start developing early on to get some promise. Either way, going to their head coaching, Brian Daboll's obviously their head coach, and he's going to remain. Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, I'm not going to put blame on him considering the offense is, well, not very talented overall. They have Saquon, but he's an impending free agent, which we'll get to in a moment. But the defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, did step away from this team, so that will be an interesting one to see how they fill that hole. It's a defensive unit that's got a lot of young players. Deontay Banks has a lot of potential. Kayvon Thibodeau got up to about 11 sacks this year, not too bad. You've got a lot to work with here. You just got to have a guy who can put it all together for that unit. Going into the depth charts now, obviously the 6-11 record, and that was at the hands of Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor primarily. They were at fault of giving Antonio Pierce his first win as a head coach to the Raiders, but that's neither here nor there. Saquon Barkley is a big player on this offense, but he's actually an impending free agent as we see here. You have guys like Mark Lewinsky and Evan Neal who were not able to play a whole lot this year. They were replaced by a guy named Justin Pugh, who came off the couch from a few years ago, I believe. I don't know how long it's been since he's been on a roster, but either way, beyond the point. John Michael Schmidt's another guy, didn't have the best year. Daniel Jones coming off IR. You can't get rid of him now because he's making $40 million a year. Your best out is after this coming season, so I have a feeling they'll stick with him this year and move off the next year. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball and check this out. Some names. Ashawn Robinson is a solid player. Dexter Lawrence is a very good player. Azeez Ojulari is another young guy who didn't get it done this year. Bobby Okereke is a good linebacker. Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously a young guy developing nicely. Adoree Jackson's okay. Xavier McKinney's pretty good. Deonte Banks, not a whole lot to work with. Then another team who lost a good safety, Jason Pinnock. That's what you see here. Isaiah Simmons is another guy who I'm interested to see if he will return. He is a free agent. Azeez Ojulari is a guy you expected more from and didn't get a whole lot out of. It's just a lot going on that, didn't gel. It just didn't seem to work this year on the field for this defensive unit, and that's something you hope to see change this next year. The draft capital is pretty nice. You get 2 seconds again here, and you have to get some receivers. You have to help Daniel Jones out if you want to even pretend to win. And then moving forward, if you want to help the next quarterback win, you've got to get them weapons, something to throw to. You have $28 million in cap. You've got 3 picks in the top 100 or so? That's pretty good. You've got to capitalize on that. And you need to move off of some of these guys that, aren't necessarily useful. Maybe you don't bring back Saquon Barkley because of the cap hit he might demand. And it's a running back. It's just not really worth it, especially with his health issues that he's consistently had. In terms of what they should do in this draft, I think receiver round 1 is a given. You have to go there. You have to get somebody there. Then rounds 2 to 3, offensive line and cornerback are major. And then 4, 5, and 6, you can hit edge. You can hit some offensive line again. You can go to quarterback. Try to get a guy to maybe see if he, diamond in the rough. Brock Purdy this thing out a little bit. In terms of free agents, you got to bring back Adoree Jackson. I think he's too good to not. Tyrod Taylor, model consistency quarterback. Not elite, but very solid in what you need to do. I think he's a decent reason to bring him back right there. Xavier McKinney needs to be re-signed. Isaiah Simmons, if I was them, I would re-sign him. However, he's in of his own. It's just weird. Ashawn Robinson could be brought back, but it just depends on what they want to do there. Going into this next season, what can the Giants do? They have to help Daniel Jones as much as possible, as I've said. You're not getting anywhere if you don't help Daniel Jones out. Don't spend needless money on guys like I said, Saquon Barkley. Don't overspend on Isaiah Simmons. Don't overspend on any of those guys. That Xavier McKinney, a safety. Don't overspend on a safety. They're not the most important position on the field. Get the guys you need to. Help this offense out. Help them move the ball on offense in the passing game. Evan Neal, develop youth. What's going on with you guys? We need Azeez Ojulari to jump out. We need Evan Neal to be the tackle that he was supposed to be coming out of the draft. And go out and get a Malik Neighbors, a Rome Odunze, a Troy Fatanu in the 2nd, 3rd round as a good tackle. Tyler Guyton as well. Maybe if you don't like Evan Neal, move one of them to guard. You do if you do like him. Jonathan Brooks is a great option at running back if you don't bring back Saquon. And then there's guys like T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd that could hit the market because of teams like the Bengals who don't have the money to pay them. Check in on all these things. Draft Malik Neighbors and sign T. Higgins as well. Make Daniel Jones have a chance. That's what you're going to have to do. And maybe next year, you go in and get Malik Neighbors, you get T. Higgins, and you get Jonathan Brooks, and you've got actual weapons for Daniel Jones to work with. Let's go ahead and go straight into Philadelphia. 11-6. 11 was their win total, and they kind of hit it. I mean, they're as close as they can be, but they lost 5 of their last 6, and 2 of those games were to the Giants and the Cardinals. That's just inexcusable. They lost their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator after last season. Obviously, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, who took the Colts and Cardinals jobs, did great jobs themselves. However, you didn't replace that with anything that clearly worked. The offensive play calling was just dull and just completely. It was consistent, actually. It was very consistent. Consistently terrible. You can't have a guy like Jalen Hurts consistently in shotgun. Put him under center. Run some play action. Look at Baker Mayfield. You get the play action going, and this guy can just feast on the defense. You got to sell the run game, especially with as good of a line as you have in Philly. You have to. Hurts has to be more consistent, and you've got to line out your secondary on defense especially, but that's really it there. Your head coach is obviously Nick Sirianni. I do not think they should move off of him at all. He went to the Super Bowl a year ago. I don't care if you say he was carried by his coordinators, he was carried by his players. The head coach is where it starts. You have to start there. And if you make it to the Super Bowl, your head coach is not a problem, in my opinion. Maybe he's not the answer, but he may not be the problem. Brian Johnson is not a good offensive coordinator. We saw that this year. I think they need to move off him, and as well as Sean Desai. Yes, he was not working with a great unit secondary-wise, and they got the top taken off of them many, many times, but you got to have some kind of improvement. They basically fired him in the middle of the season for Matt Patricia, and didn't really get much better. And yeah, so it is personnel for sure. However, you're not going to implement a new system with Patricia. You're just getting different play calls. So we'll see what happens here. I wouldn't be shocked if both of those guys were gone or one or the other. Either way. Moving on, this roster, it's a good roster overall. Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, good players. Dallas Goedert, Jason Kelce, obviously pending retirement. We're not sure yet. But Landon Dickerson was a great center at Alabama and could be easily a replacement for him. Well, not easily. No, you're not replacing Jason Kelce. Let me get that straight. But either way, he's a good O-lineman. You got to have some depth at receiver, in my opinion. You got to get more than Julio Jones, who's 37,000 years old. And you have to start working on this O-line for the future because you're sitting here with Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, and Jordan Mailata, who are all, I believe, 30+. And two of those guys could easily retire anytime, Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson. That's what we're going to focus on the offense. Cam Jurgens was definitely a bit of an issue this year, did not play very well, and Jason Kelce is probably retiring. That's why, as I said, you got to figure that out a little bit. But Landon Dickerson could take it over. Jalen Hurts needs to be more consistent. Checking out the defense, the front seven is good, but there's a mix of very old and very young. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, potentially great players coming up, but Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, old. You have Hassan Reddick, who is a good player. He's not too old, definitely. Josh Sweat as well. You've got some middle ground there. You bring in Kevin Byard, doesn't do a whole lot. You bring in Shaquille Leonard. I mean, he was washed to start with, but didn't seem to do a ton. You've got issues all over the secondary, to be honest with you. James Bradbury and Darius Slay, to me, were very big disappointments this year. Did not play as what they should have been. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, both of them should have retired last year probably, but they came back and played decently, so give it to them there. But they could easily be gone this year. You now have also Avonte Maddox, who missed a lot of time. Sidney Brown towards ACL, I believe, in the last few games of the year. Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks are guys you're really looking forward to, trying to develop this offseason. If those two guys can work out, you might have really great things ahead of you. So for Philly, draft capital is pretty good this year. You get multiple fifths. These are a lot of projected comp picks from losing guys like Miles Sanders, Suamalo, the guard that went to Pittsburgh. You've got, obviously the defensive tackle Hargrave, who went to the 49ers. The 5 positions of need to me, though, are corner, safety, interior line, linebacker, and edge. In the first round, you probably need to start with a cornerback or a safety. You've got to start there. Then you need to hit offensive line in the middle of those rounds, and then probably go back to corner or safety. You're going to need more depth there overall, and you got to make that work, unless you really truly believe in Keely Ringo and Eli Ricks, who played a lot this year, but maybe didn't play very good. Later on, hit the linebackers, hit the edge, hit the receivers, get the depth, find guys in the rough who might be able to help your offense and defense just long term. On the free agents, you need to bring back DeAndre Swift, in my opinion, at a reasonable number. Any running back is going to go that way. They might be available, but at the same time, if they want too much money, don't bring them back, because the Eagles, clearly, their O-line is the reason their run game works. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, you might bring him back, but I don't think it's necessary at the same time. Marcus Mariota, he's a quality backup. Not a bad idea to bring him back if he's going to take a reasonable number, and he probably will. Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow, you probably can get them back relatively easily. Jack Stoll, he's been a pretty good backup tight end for them. I think they're all good options to bring back. And Kelce, he's a free agent if he doesn't retire. Does he leave? I highly doubt it if he comes back another year. But, at the same time, you got to be prepared for everything. And those are just the notable guys. They have $29 million of cap room. They need to make moves. They got to fix that secondary especially. What can they do to improve now? Anything in the secondary. As I've talked about this whole time about Philly, you've got to have things for Philly work out in that secondary. The front seven is good enough to get pressure. They're good enough to get down. And if you can cover guys for more than a quarter of a second, maybe they can make plays. But if you're not going to do that and leave every receiver open, that time is just not a capable time for any of that front seven to get to the quarterback. They need to patch the O-line up, especially if Kelce leaves. You've got a couple holes. Jurgens wasn't great. Dickerson will either move over or be a guard, and then you'll have a hole at center. You got to just fix that out. You got to, the Georgia Delphia guys, Keely Ringo, Jalen Carter, all the young guys, basically. Even Eli Ricks, he's at Alabama, but whatever. Work on them. This could be your future. They already have a lot of chemistry built up. That could be great in the long run, but it has to happen soon. You have to see rewards from that sooner rather than later. And offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator changes may not be completely dire and necessary, but you've got to at least look into it and see what's up going into next year. You got to see, can Brian Johnson develop the offense? Can he change the play calls? Can he make things look a little different? Use motion, anything. Can you change things? Defensively, was it personnel? Is it Desai? We've got to figure that out. That one's a little bit more in question to me. He gets a little bit more of a little pass. In additions, Kamari Lassiter, Cam Kitchens, and Ennis Rakestraw Jr. are all parts of secondary that should be available around their pick in the first round. Powers Johnson and Trotter are two guys they could really target in the second round as well. Both should and could be available, and I think it'd be great fits there. Kenny Moore, a corner in Indy, is really solid, and you might be able to bring him up to Philly with some of that 25 whatever million you have back there. Josie Jewell, I doubt gets re-signed due to the fact they have some linebackers waiting in the wings that they drafted last year, Drew Sanders in Denver, and he's just a little older, but if he's a solid linebacker still, bring him to Philly. That's as much as it means. And Sean Murphy Bunting's a solid corner as well. If he's looking to get out of Tennessee, you might be able to nab him from there. Next year, the Eagles have a chance to make, a good turnaround, I think. They were in the Super Bowl last year, a very disappointing year this year, and then you can go and just restock. Get some things. Terrion Arnold's another guy who might be an option from Alabama. You get some things lined out, get that secondary fixed up, and your problems might solve themselves a little bit. Finally, we go to Dallas, where they finished 12-5, the best in the division, 9.5 wins, and they covered that well. However, we saw the same things from them as we do every single year. A very disturbing loss in the playoffs to Green Bay that they should not have lost. You see what went wrong here. It's Dak. Dak he was playing like a top 5 quarterback throughout the entire regular season. The first playoff game, it's over. He's done. He's going home. There's no reason to even question it. He's not a playoff quarterback. He's 2-5 in the playoffs, and there's serious questions around Dak right now. McCarthy just may be a problem as well. He doesn't really get it done. They've already announced they're bringing him back next year. We'll see how that works. I think they're just doing it because he's off contract after that, letting him play. And in my opinion, your defense is far too aggressive. This defense is just able to play from ahead. They get the early leads, and they just pin your ears back, rush the passer as hard as they can, and get a bunch of sacks, get a bunch of picks. Deron Bland is not a good corner. The only reason he broke that record that he did was because they were playing ahead and he got easy jump passes because he knew everybody was going to be throwing the ball. That's the only reason he was able to do that. You get too far gone when you do things like that. The offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, I don't know how much he does. McCarthy has called the plays, so he's mentioned here for just the sake of being mentioned. Dan Quinn, however, has had a good defense, except I think they're far too aggressive. You can't jump every single pass. You have to time the ball out, or that's why you get burnt. That's why big plays happen over your head, because you can't jump every pass. Moving on from coaching, though, since it's already pretty much been decided, we're looking at the rosters here. Obviously, Dak Prescott starting. There's an out this year for him. They potentially could move off of him. He is not going to be a guy who ever wins a Super Bowl, in my opinion, because of the fact that he doesn't get it done in the playoffs. He's 2-5. I don't want to hear he played well. His stats look good. If you say that, you weren't watching the game. He had 190 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks going into the fourth quarter, and he put up 200-something yards and 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. It's not even close to playing good. CeeDee Lamb, another guy, a great regular season. He dropped like 5 passes in the first half of that game. What happened? Why is the whole team choking? That's a big issue. It seems like a cultural issue to me. Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, solid depth. However, seemed to kind of be rocky in terms of how much they got the ball. And Brandon Cooks seemed to be frustrated for a little while. However, he went on a run where he scored a bunch of touchdowns. And I think that, quieted him up a little bit. You also have basically 3 All-Pros on this O-line, and you still let the Green Bay Packers destroy you. It's just the question marks come from everywhere, and that's where my things come in. The circles here are just representing your questions. Obviously, as I've already talked about, Gallup's just kind of been in limbo. CD and Dak are just, at this point, they're playoff chokers. You've only seen that from them. And then I love CeeDee Lamb. He's one of my favorite receivers, but at the same time, you can't deny the facts. He's been a playoff choker since he's been there. Is that Dak? Is that him? I don't know. When the ball hits you in the hands and you drop it, it looks like it's a little bit of you too. Tony Pollard is an upcoming free agent and didn't play like a real RB1 to me, so do you move off of him? I think that's a very real case that they do. Going to the defensive side of the ball, obviously a good-looking unit on paper. However, you had a lot of questions. The linebackers are not very good. You had to have a safety play down at linebacker a lot of times just because they weren't able to cover anyone. Major questions about the aggressiveness. Deron Bland, Jaron Kearse, completely far too aggressive. Trayvon Diggs has been too. He's improved from that, though, become an actual good cover corner. But Stephon Gilmore has not been the signing they hoped he was. He was okay, but nothing special. Micah Parsons, is he just getting garbage time sacks at this point? Because that's all it seems like. I mean, you only show up in games where you're up by 20 points and able to just run as fast as you can at the quarterback because he has to throw the ball. That's just, does it really count? Marquise Bell, Damone Clark are big issues to me, and I think they really have to focus on the linebacker position. Unfortunately for them, there's not a great linebacker class here in this draft, so they'll have to check that out. But they have negative $11 million in cap space. They need a safety. They need some linebacker and corner help. You can look at quarterbacks here. However, their draft capital is not very good. You get first 3 rounds, but then you've traded away everything from the 4th to 6th round. Not tons of help there. Notable free agents, though, quite a few, and that are really big names. Tyron Smith is a big one. Tony Pollard, Stephon Gilmore, Jaron Kearse, Tyler Biadasz. There's a lot of big guys here. Rico Dowdle played a good amount down the stretch, and you got to consider bringing him back. Here's what I think they got to do in the draft. A safety in round 1 or a corner, and then vice versa. Either one works. Then rounds 3 and 7, if you don't trade up anywhere in there, you got to hit a linebacker. You might even consider a receiver or a quarterback if the right one lands to you. You know, 3rd round, maybe you trade into the 5th round if a guy like Michael Pratt is still around, something like that. But you have to find something, see where things land out, and see what you can capitalize on guys slipping through the draft. Free agents, you have to bring back Tyron Smith. He's too good to not. Jaron Kearse, I don't love the player, but at the same time, you have to bring him back because you don't have anything else at safety, and he's been moving around a lot for you. Tyler Biadasz is a decent center, not too bad. It's definitely worth at least consideration. But everybody else, Tony Pollard's not a real RB1 to me. He didn't play like it and just doesn't look like it. Stephon Gilmore, you could just for depth, but he's getting older and older and older. Is it worth it? As well as Jordan Lewis. Depth, but nothing special. Rico Dowdle, I've already talked about him a little bit, but you got to figure things out there. What's next for them to finish this better this next year? I don't know. I don't know if this team can do any better. This was their best chance to win a Super Bowl since they won a Super Bowl. And how do they build off of that? They have to find something out. They need a defensive identity change to me. The pinning everybody's ears back and rushing the passer when you're up 20 is great, but you have to actually get up 20 first. And if you don't do that, especially in January, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to play defense at all, as we saw. Jordan Love just tore them up the whole game. Is Dak your quarterback of the future? We have 8 years of this guy, and all he does is choke. 6 years of playoffs, and he's 2-5. One of those wins was to a Tampa Bay team last year who wasn't even good. What is this guy going to be good enough for you to win a Super Bowl? I highly doubt it. His contract's up after, I believe, next year, so you probably wait through then. However, there's an out where you get to save a lot more money if you do the right things after June 1st. We'll see what happens. This is McCarthy's final shot, and it probably deservingly is because, oh, you can win 12 games. That's great. You don't do anything in the playoffs, so what can we expect you to do? Running game-wise, they need to find a new running back, but where does that come from? I don't know. Tony Pollard, maybe. Maybe you able to hit a Jonathan Brooks or, another Bucky Irving from Oregon, something like that, but I just don't see how you do that with no cap space. You find somebody in the draft, but you have other things you need more. We'll see what happens. Realistic additions. Tyler Nubin, Cameron Kitchens, and TJ Tampa are all secondary guys that I think would be very good for the Dallas Cowboys. Linebackers, Edgerrin Cooper and Jeremiah Trotter in the draft could be there in round 2 to 3 that you would be comfortable with, in my opinion. And then if you're able to swing the money around, Budda Baker is a great signing for y'all. He could be a great safety, and a huge hole would be filled by that. Kenneth Murray and Azeez Al-Shaair are solid linebackers that you could try to squeeze into there and hope for the best coverage-wise. Might help you some, but I don't know how far you'll get. Either way, Dallas could have a good year next year once again. It's just, will they succeed in the playoffs? That's what you're really looking forward to. They have big signings that they can make, big free agency, big draft picks they have that can mean a lot for this team in terms of being a true contender. Will we see that from them? I don't know. So going into next year, what do you think for the NFC East is next? What is next? And let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your responses to this, if this is one of your favorite teams, or as a guy looking from the outside in at a team, what do you think is wrong with any of these teams? Either way, I'll catch y'all on the next one.